The Price of Betrayal. Greetings, dear viewer. You've tuned into The Price of Cheating, a channel dedicated to those who cherish traditional family values and stand against infidelity. Be sure to subscribe as we explore matters of the heart and the cost of disloyalty. Now, let's begin. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom hummed with energy, laughter, clinking glasses, and the lively murmur of conversation filled the air. The business event was in full swing, a perfect blend of sophistication and celebration. I let myself be carried away by it all, indulging the warmth of friendly banter, my laughter mingling with the crowd's. It was one of those rare, effortless moments where everything felt perfectly aligned. A few drinks had softened my inhibitions, making me more relaxed, more open. The lively chatter, the buzz of excitement. It all amplified my exhilaration. Yet, on the edges of the gathering, a silent observer stood, Victor, my husband. He lingered at a distance, his presence steady but detached. Social occasions had never been his comfort zone. He preferred quiet evenings over bustling events. But caught in the whirlwind of the night, I hardly acknowledged his solitude. Or perhaps I chose not to. As the conversation around me turned playful, light-hearted jests flew between friends. Someone made a joke about how men were always at the mercy of their wives, and without thinking, I joined in. My laughter rang out, louder than necessary, exaggerated. Then, in a moment of reckless amusement, I pushed further. A careless remark about Victor tumbled from my lips, sharp, biting, unintended. The words hung in the air like a blade. My friends burst into laughter, their amusement fueling my misplaced triumph. For a fleeting second, I basked in the attention, oblivious of the damage I had just inflicted. But now, as I replay that moment in my mind, I see it with excruciating clarity. Victor's posture stiffened, his expression darkened with quiet hurt. His shoulders sagged under the weight of my betrayal. Yet in that instant, I was too wrapped up in the crowd's amusement to recognize the wound I had inflicted. Then everything shifted. Victor stepped forward, his movements deliberate, his demeanor unsettlingly calm. The surrounding noise faded, leaving only the rapid beat of my own heart. I forced a smile, hoping, praying, that he hadn't heard my words, that he would let them slide as he so often did. But his eyes told a different story. Beneath his composed exterior, a storm brewed. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, barely audible over the lingering chatter. Yet his words sliced through the air with finality that made my breath hitch. "It's over." Then he turned and walked away. The weight of those two words crashed into me, tilted my world off its axis. The room, still alive with laughter and conversation, suddenly felt distant, like a scene I no longer belonged to. My chest tightened, my limbs locked in place. I wanted to run after him, to take back the cruel words, to plead for forgiveness. But guilt held me captive. Around me, the party continued, oblivious to the fact that my life had just unraveled. I stood frozen, trapped in my own torment, replaying every second of that fateful exchange. The laughter, the thoughtless joke, the fleeting validation I had reveled in, each memory sharpened my regret. In my selfish pursuit of attention, I had shattered something irreplaceable. Victor was gone, and with him, the life we had built. Though the night carried on, I remained lost in the wreckage of my own making, haunted by the realization that I had become the very person I swore I'd never be. The kind of person who could betray the one who loved them in the most public, heartless way. But it wasn't always like this. I wasn't always this person. Before that fateful night, I was different. The thought of hurting Victor, especially in such a cruel manner, would have been unimaginable. I had once loved him deeply, without hesitation or doubt. Our story began on a rainy afternoon in a quaint cafe. I had been rushing, juggling too many things at once. When disaster struck, I clumsily spilled coffee all over myself. Embarrassed and flustered, I scrambled to clean up the mess, my cheeks burning with mortification. That's when Victor stepped in. He didn't try to impress me with grand gestures or charming lines. Instead, he simply handed me a napkin, his expression calm, his smile warm. His quiet presence caught me off guard, his steady demeanor unlike the loud, attention-seeking men I was used to. There was something different about him, something grounding. Our first date was just as unpretentious. We took a long walk through the park, talking for hours, exchanging fragments of our lives. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, not as the person the world expected me to be, but as my genuine self. Victor had a rare ability to listen, not just to my words, but to the emotions behind them. His unwavering patience and quiet ambition fascinated me. As time passed, I discovered a man with dreams far beyond personal gain. Victor wanted to build something meaningful, not for wealth or recognition, but for independence and purpose. He wasn't in a rush to prove himself to the world. He found joy in the journey rather than obsessing over the destination. His steady nature anchored me in ways I hadn't realized I needed. It was on another rainy day, one much like the one when we first met, that I knew, without a doubt, that I loved him. We had planned to go out, but the storm kept us indoors. Instead, we spent the day curled up on the couch, eating takeout and watching old movies. As I glanced at him, his face lit with a soft, unguarded smile, a quiet happiness settled over me. It wasn't a whirlwind passion, but something deeper, an enduring love that made me feel safe. A year later, we exchanged vows in a small, intimate ceremony. Every promise we made that day, I believed with all my heart. We swore to stand by each other, to face whatever life threw our way, to never lose sight of what mattered. But somewhere along the line, I let those promises slip through my fingers. Or maybe I lost sight of the person I used to be. Perhaps neither of us was solely to blame for what happened. Life became more complicated, and the bond we once shared began to unravel. Victor poured his heart into building his business, but despite his tireless efforts, it struggled to take off. The weight of that failure seeped into our marriage. Meanwhile, my career soared. I climbed the corporate ladder, working late nights, attending every networking event, chasing an insatiable need for validation and success. My ambition consumed me, and in that pursuit, I began to neglect the most valuable part of my life, him. Through it all, Victor remained the same. Kind, steady, supportive. But I was no longer the woman he had married. Somewhere along the way, I had hardened. I became more critical, more demanding, less patient. I wanted more status, more recognition, more success. And in my relentless pursuit of it all, I started seeing Victor differently. I stopped admiring him. His calm, steady nature, the very thing that had once drawn me to him, began to frustrate me. I resented his contentment, mistaking it for a lack of ambition. I wanted him to be more, to push harder, to chase success with the same ruthless hunger that had consumed me. But that wasn't who he was. And instead of cherishing him for the qualities that made him special, I let myself believe they were weaknesses. I resented him for not being more like me. At first, my dissatisfaction surfaced in subtle ways. Passing comments, light-hearted suggestions that he should aim higher, do more. But those remarks gradually sharpened, their edges growing crueler over time. What began as playful teasing soon turned into sarcastic jabs, and before I knew it, I was openly belittling him, even in front of others. The shift was so slow, so insidious, that I didn't realize how far I had gone until the damage was irreversible. Looking back now, I wonder if it was a defense mechanism, a way to hide my own insecurities by shifting the weight of them onto him. I had become obsessed with crafting an image of power and success, convincing myself that diminishing Victor somehow elevated me. But all it did was expose the worst parts of me. I often reflect on the woman I used to be, the one who cherished Victor for his authenticity, who valued him for more than just his achievements. That version of me is gone, replaced by someone I barely recognize. Someone who said things that can never be taken back. Our relationship didn't fall apart overnight. It unraveled slowly, the cracks spreading so gradually that I can't pinpoint the exact moment admiration turned into contempt. I replay it over and over in my mind, searching for the turning point. But it wasn't a single choice that led me to wound him. It was a slow decay, a poison that seeped into the foundation of what we once had. The truth is, my own insecurities fueled it all. As my career soared, I became the person I had always aspired to be, respected, successful, admired. I thrived on the recognition, the validation. Yet, With every step I took forward, Victor remained unchanged. He was content with the life he had built, his small business, his steady, unhurried pace. He never chased prestige or measured his worth by society's expectations. At first, I found his quiet resolve inspiring. But over time, my admiration soured into frustration. Why wasn't he more ambitious? Why didn't he share my hunger for success? The more I surrounded myself with powerful, driven people, the more I resented his contentment. I was drawn to the energy of those who spoke of high-stakes deals and relentless ambition, and I wanted Victor to embody that same intensity. It was an unfair expectation, but at the time, I couldn't see it. The first time I made a cruel remark was almost unintentional. At a dinner party, someone inquired about Victor's business. Before he could answer, I made a joke about his slow progress. It was met with laughter. Even Victor forced a smile, though it faltered at the edges. That fleeting moment gave me an intoxicating sense of control. By making him seem smaller, I felt, if only for a second, larger. And so it became a pattern. Offhand remarks, cloaked in humor, each one chipping away at him bit by bit. Victor never snapped back. He would chuckle, make a self-deprecating joke, and let it pass. But in private, I saw the toll it took. He grew quieter. His laughter, once so effortless, became rare. I told myself he was just stressed, but deep down, I knew better. I was the cause of his withdrawal. And yet, even as I saw the hurt in his eyes, I didn't stop. I couldn't. My insecurities had taken hold of me, and no amount of success seemed to fill the emptiness inside. Instead of confronting my own fears, I projected them onto Victor. Making him feel small became my way of distracting myself from my own feelings of inadequacy. But my fleeting moments of superiority came at a devastating cost. My words grew harsher. My criticisms cut deeper. And with every cruel remark, I pushed him further away. I questioned his choices, accused him of lacking ambition, of not caring enough about our future. The first time I openly criticized him, I saw the pain in his eyes, undeniable, raw. For a fleeting second, I hesitated. But instead of stopping, I pressed on, convincing myself that I was simply being honest, that my words were meant to push him forward. In reality, they weren't honesty or tough love. They were reflections of my own insecurities and fears. Now, all I have left are memories of who I used to be and the crushing weight of what I've lost. Deep down, I always knew the truth, no matter how much I tried to ignore it. With every prolonged silence, every flicker of sadness in his gaze, I could feel it happening. I was hurting him. And yet, I didn't stop, in some twisted way. It gave me a sense of control, an illusion of strength that kept me from confronting my own inner turmoil. I told myself I was the one holding everything together, but the reality was much darker. I was unraveling, and in the process, I was pulling Victor down with me. Looking back, I see it with painful clarity. I had become toxic. My fears, my self-doubt, my relentless need for validation had twisted me into someone I no longer recognized, a person who built herself up by breaking someone else down. Victor's love had always been constant, patient, unwavering. But I was too caught up in my own self-destruction to see its value. Worse, I didn't realize just how much damage I had inflicted until it was beyond repair. Piece by piece, I drove him away, and I had no one to blame but myself. I assumed Victor was unshakable, that no matter how cold or cutting my word became, his quiet, forgiving nature would withstand it. But everyone has limits, and I didn't see his until I shattered them. Slowly, steadily, I drained him, and by the time I noticed he was slipping away, it was already too late. When he finally reached his breaking point, it destroyed us both. There was no screaming, no dramatic confrontation, no flood of tears. It happened on an otherwise unremarkable evening, a Tuesday, I think. We sat across from each other at the dinner table, the silence between us heavier than the air itself, as suffocating as it had been for months, maybe even years. I don't remember what we were eating, but I will never forget the weight of that moment. I had come home exhausted, irritated, drained from another long day in a world where I was admired, respected, important. Victor had made dinner, as he often did, and instead of thanking him, I made some offhand remark about how he must have too much time on his hands. He didn't respond. He rarely did anymore. He simply sat there, absently pushing his food around his plate. The silence unsettled me. So I broke it the only way I knew how, with another jab. I made some cruel, sarcastic comment about how maybe his business would succeed if he spent less time in the kitchen. The exact words escape me now, but I remember the tone, sharp, dismissive, meant to hurt. Victor usually met comments like that with a forced chuckle, a joke at his own expense, or a quick change of subject. But this time, he didn't. This time, he set his fork down, and when he looked at me, his expression was one that I will never forget. I wasn't prepared for it. I had expected anger, for him to finally snap, to yell, to fight back. But instead, there was only quiet surrender. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. At first, I didn't comprehend what he meant. His words weren't dramatic or loud. They were steady, measured, and utterly shattering. A chill ran through me. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my tone sharper than I intended. "You can't do it anymore." Victor met my gaze, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. His eyes were tired, filled with sorrow so deep I wondered how I had never noticed it before. "This," he said, gesturing between us. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine. It's not. It hasn't been for a long time." Panic surged through me, but I fought to suppress it. "You're being ridiculous, Victor," I said, clinging to control. "We're just going through a rough patch. Everyone does." He shook his head slowly. "This isn't a rough patch, Anna. It's broken, and I don't know how to fix it." I opened my mouth to argue, to plead, but he cut me off with a look, one filled with resignation. "You've been pushing me away for years," he continued, his voice weighted with exhaustion. I held on, thinking things would get better, that we'd find our way back. But every time I tried, you shut me out. You made me feel small. And I can't do it anymore. His words struck me like a physical blow. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. If we ever fell apart, I had always imagined it would be with fiery arguments, slammed doors, and then, eventually, reconciliation. But there was no anger in his voice, just quiet defeat. "You don't mean that?" I whispered, my voice unsteady. "We can fix this. We just need more time." Victor shook his head again. "We've had time, years of it, and this is where we've ended up." Desperation clawed at me. "Victor, I'm sorry," I blurted, the words feeling foreign, unfamiliar. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just frustrated. But we can work through this, can't we?" For a brief moment, I thought he might waver. But then, with a sorrowful shake of his head, he shattered that hope. "I don't think I have anything left to give." Silence filled the room, thick and unbearable. All the control I had clung to so desperately slipped through my fingers in an instant. "I love you, Anna," he said softly. "But love isn't enough, not when it's this one-sided." I wanted to beg him to stay, to promise I would change. But after so many years of acting like I didn't need him, I no longer knew how to ask for forgiveness. Victor stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'll stay at my brother's for a while," he said, avoiding my eyes. "We both need some space." And then he was gone. The soft click of the door echoed in the emptiness, in the quiet of a house that suddenly felt far too big. I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, replaying the moment over and over in my mind. I had pushed him too far, too many times, and now he was gone. I had no one to blame but myself. It was my own bitterness, my need for control, my fear of vulnerability that had driven him away. I thought I was strong. I thought I didn't need anyone. But as I sat there in the suffocating silence, I realized just how fragile I truly was. Victor had been my anchor, the best part of me, and now he was gone forever.